Actually, we have two speakers this morning, both from the organization Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. Some of you, I'm sure, will remember a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we had Dorsey Nunn, who is one of the, I believe, co-founder and executive director of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. And these are the two gentlemen we have today, Amir Amma and Arthur League, are both also associated with the Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. Amir is a staff member, a community organizer, and Arthur League is very active in the organization and its various programs, and is also a member of its board. And we will give them free rein to make remarks and let them decide about when it's time for questions, and including others as they will be doing. It's a pleasure to have both of them with us today. And there's water up here for you.
Hello? Ooh, good. All right, good morning, everybody. Morning. My name is Amir Varick Amma, and I'm a member of All of Us or None, a project, as what Paul said, of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. A quick history with them. Legal Services for Prisoners with Children have been active in the community here in in California for over 37 years, fighting for disenfranchised through actions and legal. Out of their work came All of Us or None. And when All of Us or None find out that individuals that was incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, need to go around and speaking in our voice. There's no way that individuals who wasn't incarcerated know the torture and turmoil that goes inside. That's like me trying to talk about how it is being in World War I or II, and I don't know nothing but books. I can maybe talk about it through empathy, but I was never there, and I would not be able to speak in that voice. So that's what we do at All of Us or None. We speak in our voice, and we speak the power to everybody in the community. So today I'm going to tell you, or try to form some information about the prison system and currently a new law that's coming around. History, you will hear these words that's really messing us up in society. The war on drugs. This war on drugs, then you will hear, if you do some research, about the prison industrial complex. Then throughout all the media, you always hear crime, punishment, and fear. And let me stop here first. I'm going to give a quick synopsis, about 10 to 15 minutes. Then I'm going to give the officer to give his words, and then we would like to have a lot of interaction. So we're going to be bouncing around a lot of topics, but it all deals with the two things of action and inaction. So we're going to try to give actions today. So right now, the drug war, I'm going to give you some statistics and laws on it. The drug war currently has cost taxpayers over $1 trillion. $1 trillion. And it's continuously climbing, and there's no end in sight, and it's a fictitious war, because you have people that's in a maximum security prison right here in the United States still overdosing on drugs. So what type of war on drugs are we doing? We have laws, and these laws are giving people inability to act, and this is our voting process. Our voting process is supposed to be a process of inclusion. It gives the community a voice. Voting helps to allocate funds to this community. Voting sways the laws. These laws are also inclusive or exclusive. And if it's exclusive, then it hurts a certain community. And if it hurts that certain community, it hurts their quality of life. And then if it hurts that community's quality of life, it should become a public safety issue for everybody in the community or in society to say, wait, what's going on over there? Let's help out. Let's see what's going on and hear them in that voice. So today we have another issue that's coming around, and that's marijuana prohibition, that we call it. There's so many people like me in the early 80s and 90s. I tried to get a job. I went for computers. I was able to type 65 words a minute. Went to all the trade schools, and everywhere I went, I couldn't get a job. I'm like, why? What the heck is going on? So the only thing that was viable for me was selling some marijuana. Because if I worked in a fast food job, by the end of the week at that time in the early 80s, I probably would have received $100 for that whole week, 40 hours. Then we have to talk about the $50 for transportation just to get to and from work, all right? But then I borrowed $50 from the first time to get for that first week. So my check is already gone, and I didn't do nothing but just transportation. How is someone supposed to survive like that? So I would sell marijuana, little plant that, grows here and there, and I would serve time for it, not a lot, but the ramifications of it today is still hurting me and thousands of others in communities, because someone now says that this is cool. Like, hey, okay, marijuana has some effects. It has a lot of medical effects, and people's doing it for recreation now, and we have a lot of people pushing for marijuana. But there's still people who are in prison for marijuana serving some longer sentences than I had. There's no one talking about those individuals. We still have people that's rotting in prisons for drug laws that we know is punitive. And then when these individuals come home, currently, as you hear the statistics with Michelle Alexander, everybody knows, United States, we only have like 5% of the world population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. That means that's over 2 million families who's disenfranchised. So there's over 2.2 people inside. All of them have some type of family member outside. What happens to society when we send all these individuals home after doing 25, 30 years incarcerated? There's no retirement plan for these individuals. But what are they supposed to do? They already have because they have no credit, so they can't get no type of housing. So what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to go into shelters and live like that, or go right back to the streets? No one's talking about all this. But remember, in the beginning I said it's $1 trillion that the United States has spent currently, your tax money, our tax money, on a fictitious drug. Now I'll give you some more statistics. It costs only like $20 billion to stop homelessness and hunger across the United States. What are we doing? We're going to spend $1 trillion for a war on your own people, or $20 billion that can stop homelessness and hunger? I don't know if that's really a question to be debated. Because the average person, a humane person, would be like, yo, that's not even a question. Why aren't we doing this? In every community, in every city that I've been through across the United States, I see these mega buildings that's empty, that can be converted. What are we doing? How is our military budget still so big? And we do have defense, but we have, I think, about 15 aircraft carriers, and our closest ally might have 1. We have enough arsenal to place everywhere around the world 2 times over. No one else can do that. So we should take at least 1% of that budget and give it to the people in the United States to stop homelessness and hunger. Now, let me go back to the point why we're here, though. That's just one statement. When you're incarcerated, there's so much that we need to do, and we're trying to do it now with this marijuana prohibition. The first prohibition in the communities back in the days was with alcohol. In the disenfranchised communities, there definitely was some black bootleggers out there, right? They did their own, but when they did prohibition, there was no type of black distilleries given. Why is that? Some of you might be a little old enough to remember the numbers game. Today is lotto, right? Again, in the disenfranchised community, another prohibition, and they took it out. And we're left hanging. Now you're going to do this on marijuana. All all these thousands of people who've been incarcerated for marijuana, who can't get a job, who can't get housing because they was arrested for marijuana, are they also going to be left out when this thing gets legalized across the United States? They're already doing that in the laws. They're making laws saying anybody who was arrested for marijuana or sold for marijuana, they can't become a grower. They can't own a dispensary. They can't do nothing to make no money off this multi-billion-dollar industry that's already here. It's already being laid out in the law. And this is why I said back in the beginning, our voting process. A voting process is supposed to be a process of inclusion. Voting process gives a community a voice. A voting process helps allocate funding. A voting process sways the law. In the disenfranchised community, voting process is one of the processes that definitely have been eliminated, is not encouraged. So again, you don't have a voice. So this is why we employ everybody who's really humane, who knows that they love this country and thinks that we can do better. This is why we fight. And this is why I'm here. This is why I go across the United States and implore everybody to get involved on this issue, because if you're silent on the issue, that means you're giving consent. You know, we come in here and asking everybody, when these elected officials come around, ask them how do they feel about this. Why are these mega billionaires making these type of laws? So that's just some things that I know for a fact that we have to be inclusive about. I'm going to let Arthur come up here to give a different spill on it, and then I would like to open up for some questions and answers. All right?
Hi. Can you hear me? My name is Arthur League. I'm on the board of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, so I think the first thing I need to do is clear some things up about that. So Dorsey is the executive director of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. He's not a co-founder. And that's important because the founder of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children is a woman. Her name is Amir Varick, and she's an outstanding fighter for human rights. I think the other thing that I'd like to say is how much I appreciate you as humanists, as people who get it, who are not looking for some notion of a reward for no longer existing, but people who are participating in developing the rewards for society right now, and nothing is standing in your way. And that's really exciting. I mean, it's wonderful that this community exists. So I'd like to go back a little bit to what Amir was saying about this marijuana notion. And so I'm going to be asking you for something. So essentially there's an initiative being put forward to decriminalize and make marijuana a recreational drug that people can go in and buy. I'm sure they're going to have some very exciting names for those various marijuana products. When I first got into thinking about this, my childhood came back. And maybe some of y'all know this from your childhoods or younger years. LSM, what is it? Well, I can't remember. Lucky Strikes means fine tobacco. I mean, I remember that from a child. It's a slogan. I remember it to this day, right? Winston's tastes good, like a cigarette should. I remember this stuff from my childhood. These are stuff that, that kind of stay with you if you hear them long enough. So there's an initiative being put forth. Interesting, and I think it's two, but I know it's one, of the major proponents of this initiative is someone out of Reagan's administration who was an architect on locking people up around this substance called marijuana. So today, it has been estimated by people smarter than I that if we can legalize and decriminalize, it can be a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so the same people who chase people all over this country over marijuana are now proposing that we legalize it and that it becomes an industry in our country. I don't have a problem with marijuana or any water, any of that stuff. I just don't have a problem personally with it because, I'm not with telling human beings what they need to be doing around their bodies. However, in this proposed law is already written that if you've been convicted of a felony, you cannot participate in the growing or selling of marijuana. So there's a $1 billion industry that you're locked out of from the get-go. That's structural discrimination. We, as an organization, pushed an initiative across the country, and it's changed the laws in over a third of the country, and it was called Ban the Box. Has anybody heard of that? Okay. Well, Ban the Box was to remove these discriminatory questions in employment applications that got your request for a job thrown in the garbage can before anybody ever saw you, when they looked at this box that says, have you been convicted of a crime? Have you been convicted of a felony? Have you been convicted by a court? Different ways it's said in different places. But it's not only said in jobs, it's said in housing. This box exists. Education, credit. They can deny you credit. Life insurance. Because there's some statistics say if you've been locked up, you're not going to live long enough for us to make any money off of you. So you do your time, you get out, and then you start facing the structural discrimination, the things that society puts in the way to keep you bouncing back. Well, we've been fighting that since 2003, and at this point, over 100 million people in this country lives in jurisdictions where that box no longer exists in the way it existed back in those days. And to be clear, we don't care what you ask us, as long as it's based on a conditional job offer. So hear us out, and then ask us anything you want to ask us. That's about that. But going back to this initiative, already written in this initiative is that if you've been convicted of a felony, you can't participate. The very people who support this initiative have never once opened their mouths about the people who are imprisoned today for things like possession of marijuana for sale, conspiracy to sell marijuana, and they got more laws than I know that they can charge you with to take a stick of that substance and turn it into Jesse James and Frank James level of crime, just by the way they do what they do. So what I'm asking you is, if people come to you with that initiative, to simply tell them that as long as the discriminatory part of that initiative, locking people out, locking the experts out, I might say. I mean, who else knows more about marijuana than people who actually participated in the market, whether it was legal or not legal? But they want to lock folks out. So we ask that you simply tell them that as it's written, I can't support it. So we're going to have a guy named Gavin Newsom who's going to run for mayor. Run for governor after Jerry Brown. He's a big-time proponent of this. And even he doesn't get the structural discrimination built, into these bills. So I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm one of the few people probably exist that never smoked the stuff. I'm a country boy. I grew up in the South. They said, don't be a dope. Somebody called it dope. It wasn't for me. But that's just my story. So what we're going to ask very clearly is that people take offense to structural discrimination, because ultimately it's about public safety. And I know people don't a lot of times hear people who've been to prison getting up talking about public safety. But I need you to know that it means something to me. I raised a family. I'm actually retired. I draw a pension, one that I don't even have to have a part-time job. I own a house in Albany, California, which is kind of hard to get into because it's so small. I got neighbors. I don't want anybody coming shopping at my house. But I understand why people go shopping at other people's houses. It's not like, rocket science to me. When you lock people out, people won't starve. They won't voluntarily starve. So you could talk about this stuff forever, but what we would be more interested in is hearing, from you guys. I know I am. I spent a whole lot of time on the computer actually learning, about your start in 1941, and the various things that, not the Humanist movement started in 1941, mind you, but this particular organization of it. So I'd like to hear from you about you guys. Thank you.
I'll carry the mic around. I would like to hear one more thing from one of you, if you would. Just the very name of the organization, Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. Could you talk a bit about the effect on families of persons who are incarcerated? That's one of the really things that's not seen at all. When you think about people being in prison, you think about the person that's in prison. But the effect upon the extended families is just one of the other horrors of this whole prison industrial complex. And then we'll go to questions starting with Mark here.
Yes, thank you. That's actually, there's several statistics that just came out that says who pays for incarceration, and we're finding out the family members pays more. I was incarcerated wrongfully for some narcotics, and I did almost 2 decades. And in that period of time, my mother has spent over, I'm underestimating, $25,000 just in the phone bill. It cost her at least $500 every month extra just to come see me, and maybe if giving me a package. So it actually causes a lot of problems, because I was like, yo, don't come see me. How you gonna tell your family member don't come see you? Between lawyers and legal services and everything else that she went to try to get for me to try to bring my case into life, I was also beat up by the police for 8 hours. She actually lost her house, and we're still feeling the ramifications of it today, being homeless, going around. So the families pay the blunt of the cost of incarceration. The children are hurtful because the parent is not there, whether it's the mother or the father. Then the grandparent is more pressure put on the grandparent, when y'all supposed to be, the grandparents are supposed to be all, yo, peace, love, happiness, have fun. Now you got to pay this role all over again. And how are we going to get money? Taking them to school, so forth and so on. And then there's an emotional component there of that loved one being lost. Then I'm finding out there's even more of a component because now, as I'm coming home, I'm finding out that my mother is, at first she was released or relieved of me being home, but now that I'm home, is the bitterness of me doing so much years for some narcotics. So again, it's another emotional burden that's placed on the family. So we know there's a lot of emotional burdens placed on the family, and the cost of incarceration of this multi-billion-dollar complex is bearing the blood on them. Dorsey, our executive director in LA, knows that this is really important, so we actually just hired another individual. She was actually inside the organization and moved, and we're trying to build just a family unit component now that concentrates all on the children and the parents of those who's incarcerated. So it's really a big issue, and it's coming to life right now. But this is just some more of the ramifications of incarceration that no one thought about. The punitive damages is really unspoken about.
Thank you.
Let me say something about that. So I'm on the board of LSPC, and Amir here, he's a new organizer, come from New York. So I go back a lot of years with LSPC. So I think what's your question, the genesis of your question, is some of the stuff we do around families. So Family Unity Project, it goes back years, and we finally got enough funding to have someone focus continuously on it. The other thing that we've done is we actually wrote a law that it took us 3 years and 2 governors to get it signed. It was passed by the legislature every time it was voted on. And that law was to stop pregnant women from being shackled, going from the county jails to courts. Governor Brown finally signed the law after vetoing it 1 year, and we stayed persistent, and we kept getting more and more legislators to vote for it. I guess maybe he saw it ultimately it could be overridden. The other thing is we began to look at women, and in fact, women prisoners were the really important people around the development of LSPC. A lot of times men got services, recognition. Everybody thought about prison, they thought about men, but it wasn't just men being locked away. There were women too. And so we began what's called an habeas process in conjunction with USC, where we challenged the decades of imprisonment of women who had killed their abusers. So, we live in a country where there's a lot of times men abuse women even to the point of beating them to death, or stabbing them to death, or bringing about death in some form or another. Well, all women just didn't stand around for that. Some women chose to protect their lives. In this society, women are not viewed as equals in the society. If that's news to anybody, I'm sorry to bring the bad news, but it's the truth. And so oftentimes women were prosecuted as if they had no right to defend their lives. And so we began a habeas project because the law didn't even allow women to defend themselves. First, we challenged the law. And once the law was changed, they call it battered spouse syndrome today, but back then it was called battered women syndrome, was able to be used in court to mitigate I acted so I would not die. They couldn't say that in court before. Once we began this habeas project, we were able to release 39 women from prison who most of the time were grandmothers, people that spent 30, 35 years. They were first battered by their abusers, and then they were battered by the state. So that's one of the things that LSPC was able to do. And we have elder women's services, and we fought the torture of solitary confinement, and won. We just had a settlement where they had people locked up for 40 years, 23 and a half hours a day, and never saw the sun. So we actually litigate. We had the voting rights to return to 60,000 Californians because the Secretary of State decided we couldn't vote. We fought that on the basis that there are actually laws on the books that determine who can and who can't vote, and non-elected people just can't make that, well, they can't make that decision without the legislature. So we won those. So we're an active law firm, but we're also activists. And so when you see us as All of Us or None, we are the activist people. We're the people that got on the street, that knocked on doors across the country, that organized people to ban that box. That's where we come in, but we are a project of legal services for prisoners with children, and at the same time, proud members of All of Us or None. And I hope that gives you a little bit about the organization.
Hi, I'm Mark Burkell, and great presentation. We all hear lots of things about what doesn't work. I'm curious about what does work. You know, if you've been in prison for a decade and you're coming out, and how do you make that transition from, to become a normal, happy, tax-paying member of society? And I'm just wondering, tell me the things that actually work, if you can, what kind of jobs, seem to be the most successful, that people from prison can get into, what, and things that we can do that would work, that would make, minority society, people in minority societies more successful, so that they're the same as everybody else, So that's my question, is what works?
There's a lot that doesn't work, but in the short manner, we found out family is the one thing that helps individuals while they're inside and when they come home. There's resources that's supposed to be going down, trickle down, and by the time it gets to those family members, because of structural discrimination, you really have no options. If you don't have a family member or if someone doesn't get you a job, there's very little to none options of someone coming home, especially after doing so much time. So this is why we're in the process. We are activists asking everybody to applaud you. When we talked about that issue of banning the box, that was one of the most important. It even happened to me. I went to a job interview, and I came home. I have a degree with a high GPA in social work, but even in my own field, I couldn't get a job. So when you file this application, it says, have you ever been checked, ever been convicted of a felony or have a court? Whatever you checked it, usually the employer sees it and throws it to the side next. No matter how good you are, if you don't have someone who's vouching for you to give you a shot, then usually is none, is 0 to none. So it's very difficult. This is why we're trying to change the structural discrimination within the laws to give people opportunity to make that transition. Another thing that we're complaining about is when money is allocated to these resources, it's not given to individuals who's on the ground that's really needed. It's always given to some agency or someone else who doesn't know about that community, and they're going to determine to make some program to help that community, instead of going directly to that community. So that's one of the reasons that we advocate to speak in our voice for all resources to come to us and bring us to the table and let us design it together. If you invite me to the table and say, does this work, that means I'm part of the menu and we can't create the menu together. Okay, that's good? Enough? Right on?
Can I take a shot at that as well? So that's asked a lot. And fortunately, during this Ban the Box campaign, we were able to ban the box in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we didn't stop there. We did a study on what it meant that the box was banned. And we found out that when people got opportunities, outcomes changed. And so that study is actually published. And we don't have the resources to do the kind of studying that we would like to do so that we have more information. If you have an opportunity, you have an opportunity to change your conditions. And if you have no opportunity, you got a problem. So it's actually just opportunity, and that's what the study came back showing.
Hi, I wanted to ask you, when the law changes, let's hope it does, that marijuana is no longer a criminal thing to use or buy or sell, what happens to those people who are in jail for 20 or 30 years for a marijuana crime? Are they going to be released?
Not necessarily. That's part of the problem. Not necessarily. That's part of the problem. There's nothing proposed in any of this stuff. The only proposal is, let's get rich. The people who are pushing this are talking about, let's get rich. The folks who are still, in prison, it's an afterthought at this point. Hopefully, you'd like to think that we lived in a just society and people would take care of that right away.
Because if it's no longer a crime, how do you keep people locked up for years for something that's no longer a crime?
Well, in this society, they got some fancy words. And one of those fancy words means that what's in the past is in the past, and the law that's in the present only affects laws in the past if you designate them to. So it's not automatic. It's not automatic. I was talking to a child. I think everybody's a child to me nowadays. But a young man who was a teenager, just got out of YA. He did 2 years for a single joint of marijuana. Why is that? If anybody in here got caught with a single joint of marijuana, the most that would happen is somebody would give you like a ticket, right? No, everywhere in the state of California. Yeah, you get a ticket. See, that sound good? But if you were 17 and you get caught with a stick of marijuana, you're not necessarily getting a ticket. You can get a one-way trip to a cage. And this young man did. So if you're thinking about logic in California, maybe not.
Think about the damage that alcohol does to our society compared to marijuana. There's no comparison. Alcohol is far worse. Far worse.
Okay. What is the status of the ban the box in California right now in terms of state employment? Is it still on the state forms?
No, San Francisco is one of the places that taken out. I don't know if we have every place, but California is one of the places that has adopted the practice. This is our home state of LSPC, so it's here. It can go further. So we're doing another push now as we speak. We're asking the president to go just a little bit further with ban the box. He mentioned it in his speech about 2 months ago, early November, and he made it executive memo for the government. saying government workers, they can't ask that question, but that's only a small portion. The government gets most of their work done by contractors. So his memo only went for government. It didn't go for all contractors. So now we're doing the push. If hopefully you can get involved with me, give me information. We're sending more letters out to Obama asking, listen, to make this for all the federal contractors too, then this gives greater opportunity for everybody across the country to have a job.
Kind of to answer your question, California has banned the box statewide. It was passed initially by an administrative decision by Arnold Schwarzenegger, of all people. And we didn't think that that was enough, so we pushed for a law. And so there's actually a law banning the box in California today.
Hi, a follow-up to that. Is that banned just for government employment, or is that banned entirely throughout the private sector, or do you know what the status is?
Well,
of the
it's
ban
state,
box?
federal, which one?
Well,
Obama did?
At the state level, you said it took effect in California.
Right.
Does that affect the private sector as well as
Yeah,
government?
everybody.
Everyone.
If it's in the state, any business done in the state has to follow the state laws.
No, that's not accurate. In California, it's government contracting statewide. In San Francisco, we've actually been able to pass a local ordinance that covers private contractors with, I think it's over 5 employees. I may be wrong about that number. It may be higher than 5, but it does cover private contractors in San Francisco.
And then a follow-up to a similar issue, in addition to banning the box, in order to gain employment in certain professions, legal profession, for example, you have to go through the bar. At the Bar Association level, they will ban a felon. The Medical Association would also ban felons. Is anything being done to address those issues?
The bar in every state, individuals who family can take the test, but once you get ready to go for the bar, then that's when your personal character gets involved. You will have to show what you have been doing since upon release. There is several cases of individuals who were formerly incarcerated that are practicing lawyers now. It's a challenge, but you will have to just continue to push it. That's a real big issue in the law. I know several people now who are formerly incarcerated. They're working up underneath lawyers as paralegals, and they're trying to take that next step now. So keep an eye on that one.
And just to add a little bit to that, we do have people who've been able to get into even medicine. One of our members who's doing the family unit project is a registered nurse, and she's worked in hospitals here as a registered nurse. When it comes to the law, the Bar Association can challenge your right to be a lawyer. They can't make that decision. That decision is made by a judge. That's the good news. The bad news is these are the same people that said corporations was people. So if you just go into a judge, who knows what you may come up with. But our name, All of Us Are None, is from a poem by a German poet named, boy, it's so hard for me.
Bertolt Brecht.
You can pronounce it. Yeah, Bertolt Brecht. If you ever have a chance to read this poem, we think it's wonderful. But that poem was the favorite poem of one of our contemporaries who worked with us around developing this whole movement, a man by the name of Nathaniel Harrington. He was a foster care kid who got an opportunity. He got out, he couldn't find a job, so he decided to go to law school. Didn't even go to college. He went to law school, passed the course, and they challenged his right to be an attorney. And he fought, and the judge said, hey, what you did was youthful indiscretion, and you've shown that you should be given an opportunity. And not only did he become an attorney who fought for people, he actually became an administrative law judge in Berkeley, of all places, which probably the only place, who knows. But after doing that for a while, one day he said, look, I left all them people behind in those cages. I need to do something to help him. He resigned his judgeship and went to the San Francisco County Jail and became the director of Prisoners Legal Services. Unfortunately, Nathaniel died in a tragic house accident, but sometimes you get over. One of our members in North Carolina who was the person smarter, well, I won't say smart enough because he's brilliant, but he had the wherewithal to develop the mechanism to get the study that I was telling you about, to showing what changes are. He's an attorney. Not only that, now he's one of Obama's attorneys. He's in the he's on the reentry council of the Obama administration. So it happens. Sorry for being long-winded.
Hey there, my name's Robert. Thanks for giving the talk. I wanted to ask what your perspective is on drugs other than marijuana. And the reason I ask is that I work in social services, and here in San Jose I work with the homeless population, a lot of mental illness in the homeless population. And I haven't seen a whole lot of marijuana charges, but I've seen a lot of my clients have been coming in with, they've been jailed for possession of meth. And it certainly causes disruption in their life, because then their Social Security benefits get turned off when they go into jail. So when they come out of jail, it can take several weeks, if not months, to reinstate those benefits. And so I can't find them housing because they don't have any money until those benefits get restarted. And then the other example I wanted to share is back in Illinois, I was working with a youth who was taken away by Children Protective Services, and I was trying to reunite him with his mother, but then she was jailed for possession of cocaine. So that was another example where the drugs, it caused a problem where we could have reunited and made some progress, so to speak. So what do you guys think on those other substances apart from marijuana?
Let me try that one. So I have heroes and sheroes. I need to tell you about one of my sheroes to give you my perspective. It was a woman by the name of Betty Ford. She was married to a president of the United States, and she gave face to the reality that drugs addictions are an illness and not a crime. So my position on drugs is that addiction is an illness and it should be treated that way. And I don't have a value judgment on human beings' choices. I'm not smart enough for that. So that's just where I come from.
Same thing I was going to say. We need more resources for that issue. That's part of the ramifications of this war on drugs. It's easy to vilify someone who's addicted to whatever drug. Methods has been, the increase in heroin has been increased over the last 4 or 5 years, especially in rural communities. And the only thing everybody in society who's in those officials, they only think punishment. They don't think have nothing type of resources or any type of humane treatment of unifying the families. So that's my position. Like I said, my degree's in social work. I know that problem. And we always fight in policies, and policies is the things that's hurting everybody across the United States. And that's why at LSPC, what we do, our core group, our core focus is to change the structure of discrimination throughout the United States. That's one of the issues too.
Next question is here.
Hi, I'm William, and I'm kind of, I follow this, I think it's a systemic problem in our society. I mean, we're the #1 country that incarcerates more of our citizens than any other country, third world, any country. I mean, it seems like, are we that bad that we need to be put in prison? Are we supposed to be the number one country in the world? Why do we have so many criminals? What's the problem? What is the systemic problem that is creating this? Whether it's with, I think criminalization of everything, making everything instead of, it's a disease, it's a problem, a personal problem people have. Why do we have all these prisons, and what can be the alternative? I know there's other countries that have different programs than we do, and hardly any prisons. How it will work in this country, I don't know, because there's a lot. This country is unique in diversity and different problems that we have. I would like to hear your take.
We live in a country that says corporations are people. Let's start with that. Where we get tripped up a lot of times is we look for logical explanations to why things go on in the United States, and we miss the obvious. The obvious is follow the money. So when the prison population from my day, about 10 years after I got out, because I'm kind of, I'm an older person who, lived through that situation. When I left, there was 9 prisons. Today there's 34, 5 or 6 prisons. Well, it was about resources. It was about money. It was about, just like the marijuana initiative that's coming up, it became a $1 billion industry. People made a lot of money off of locking people up. What happened was they forgot something, or they didn't look down the money trail far enough. All they looked at was the money that they was getting today. So what through the ranch, and while we're talking about it today, is the people who got all the money for building the prisons, which is called infrastructure. Well, our own infrastructure right here in society is falling apart. I mean, I don't know how many potholes y'all drove over on the way here, but I bet you somebody saw one, right? And once you locked all these people up, you had to take care of them. So now there's billions of dollars coming out of society, going into taking care of people that were locked up crazily, as far as I'm concerned. And so the same people that lock them up now are saying things like, we got to be smarter on crime. We got to let these people go with these low-level
drug offenses.
Cases, drug offenses. We can't be chasing them anymore. Basically what they're saying is, we can't get contracts to fix the infrastructure because all the money is going to keeping these people in prison. So it ain't that we're bad. Our system is bad. That's why I like you guys, right? It's like when you put human substance, that which we are as a species on the planet of Earth, I would say innately that we're not bad folks. What's fundamental is in this society, it's predicated not on us, not on people, it's on resources, it's on money. And that's the problem. So when you have really a question about this doesn't make sense, follow the money. Just take a look at who's making money and it'll start making sense right away. Hope that helps a little bit.
Just to add on the money position, legislatures will vote to keep somebody incarcerated and spend at least $50,000 a year to keep that person incarcerated. But the legislator won't vote to give this person $15,000 a year to make a successful transition. Hey.
First of all, thank you very much for your excellent presentation to both of you. And secondly, interesting coincidence. This morning I was listening, as I always do on Sundays, a program on KCBS radio called In Depth. They broadcast it from 8:30 to 9, both AM and PM, the same program. And interestingly enough, has no ads for a commercial station. That's unusual. Well, anyway, today it was an interview with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Joseph Marshall, who is a member of the San Francisco Police Commission. I think he's an African-American gentleman, and he has started an organization called the Omega Boys Club Alive and Free. You know about that one? Oh, okay. Well, I don't have to say much about it, except that if you have a radio and you have some time tonight, turn KCBS radio, AM or FM, at 8:30 p.m. Thank you.
Hi, I remember that movie, I think it was Silver Streak, maybe, and it was with two funny guys, and they went to prison in Arizona, and they said, where did they get all these black people in Arizona to put in prison? And don't you think that a lot of what's going on is based on racism in terms of who gets sent to jail and who doesn't?
I don't think you'll ever persuade Arthur and Amir that that's the case.
You need a spokesperson's job? Because I'm on your team.
Of course, race has a lot to do with it. But who gets affected? It's the total society. I mean, hey, those those puddles in the street that I'm telling you about, they're not put there for me, and when I go by, they grab them and move them out of the way for you to come by and drive on a smooth street. They're there affecting everybody. So when you go after anybody, and it's not just black people, let's be clear that Latinos are chased. We're in San Jose. There's a proposed ordinance in San Jose right now. They're proposing to do this right now. And that is that if you rent in this city and you are arrested or charged with a crime, you can be evicted. You notice I didn't say anything about conviction? Just arrested. You can be convicted. Right now this is going on. We left a meeting Thursday? We come down here to kind of fight for folks down here because it's directed not so much at our community, it's directed at Latinos. It's who it's really. Yes.
But no,
yes.
this was right.
No,
but
just arrested.
it's all right. You're hitting the ramifications. So if I'm a renter and I'm renting from Arthur, right? Say, and this is the real hard gist of it. Say I'm a grandparent, right? And I'm renting from Arthur, and I have my grandson come over, and my grandson wants to throw a party. Go ahead, no problem. So my grandson's going to invite friends, right? It's a party. If one of my grandson's friends get arrested, I get evicted. Not conviction, no nothing, just a simple arrest. Anybody coming to that unit. So what they're doing now, again, this is strictly for the Latino community out here. And when they was bringing this to the Latino community couldn't speak English. So all the materials that they brought to them, guess what language it was in? English, yeah, of course. So what are we doing? You know, there's already know if a lot of people get evicted, there's already no housing as is. Where are these families going to go? What are they going to do? You know, that's it. No one's going to voluntarily starve. And how could you even conceive of something like this? If someone gets arrested, you get evicted, and it's a big push. And then when we did some research on it, this is not the only city it's done. It was already enacted in 80 cities and counties throughout the United States already. And these are the same architects who was with this crime-free bill stuff in the 80s, 90s when the prison industrial complex started growing. So now that that's so-called shrinking, they have to find ways to put people back in prison. And they're going to vilify people any way means necessary. This is why we're out here imploring everybody to get involved. It's going to affect everybody in the community if that takes place here in San Jose.
Excuse me, is that ordinance have anything to do with the person being arrested not being able to pay their rent because they're in jail, even though they're not convicted yet? Or does any person that happens to be there, not even the leasee,
Any
or the
person
owner,
who's associated
person's
going
arrested,
to
then they
that
can be
apartment.
evicted?
Where you going? 14A. Okay, 14A resident, you out of here.
So, what if this is a private home, not a big
If the
apartment
private
building?
home communities, if this is my recollection of reading it from our last board, if that whole community say it is a gated community and they opt into this type of program, then they can be subject to the same thing.
Is this actually taking place, or is this
Yes,
just an
we went to a
ordinance?
hearing. The city is now pushing for this, and this is why they're having hearings throughout here in San Jose.
Who are the people that are pushing for this?
If you give me your email, and at the end, next time we have a hearing out here, I'll send an email blast to everybody to come to the hearings to get involved. And that's where you can know the specific names of the city ordinance who's there. You have members from the police department pushing for it, and members in the housing who's pushing for it. And they say they are directors, quote, city officials, want this.
Okay, so this would be passed by the Board of Supervisors, this ordinance?
It's the city council. It's the city of San Jose. And you know, for transparency's sake, we have been beating them back. We have gotten the whole committee of people, what they call the stakeholders, to object. And so supposedly there's a professor who's been running these meetings that's supposed to take it back to the city council and let them know that the city has, everywhere he's gone, and they met all over San Jose, it's been rejected. And so I'm personally pretty optimistic that we're probably going to beat it back, because the district attorney in this city objects to it, as well as one member of the police department has objected to it. So I'm hopeful we're going to beat it back. But I just want you to know what's out there, just what people are proposing. And it's about the fact that they can use this space for people with more money. Like I say, follow the money. This is what this is about. It's called gentrification. And by the way, gentrification has nothing to do with race. Gentrification has nothing to do with black, white, brown, anything else. It's the gentry, right? The people with resources.
The professor you mentioned, would that be Scott Myers-Lipton, who's working on this?
I don't know off the top. That's why I was like, if you give me an email, I will be able to send you all the information. I don't want to give names who. But one way that I do want to bring out how they're getting people to even look at it, the title was Crime-Free Neighborhoods. And of course, if you say, hey, do you want a crime-free neighborhood? Everybody will be like, yeah, I want a crime-free neighborhood. I want a crime-free neighborhood. I don't want a crime-free neighborhood. But when you read the fine print, how they're proposing this, it's just structural discrimination all the way across the board.
Other questions? Oh, here's one right here.
Suppose this initiative to decriminalize marijuana should pass. We might think of it as perhaps basically a good idea, but flawed, because it locks out certain people. What would you consider the chances of, after it passes, amending it to bring it in a little better perspective?
And we both actually went to a conference in Washington, D.C., put on by an organization called Drug Policy Alliance. And they support this amendment. And they raise that same idea of amending it. I think, you heard about the snowball chance? I think it's about the odds of the snowball lasting in that place, that they call, I don't want to use bad language, I use enough of it, Hades, right? Snowball's not going to last. It's not going to happen. You mean hell? I wanted to say that. I know this is a group I can say it in, but, I'm practicing trying to be a better person. I mean, it's really important to me to not have to use that language. I'm just practicing. Yeah, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be an amendment. So, for me, I would love to see anything on the books that's not taking somebody to jail. I won't vote for this ordinance. I won't ask anybody to vote for it. I would actively ask people not to vote for it or this proposal, as long as it has structural discrimination in it. And I believe that you go to the people who are proposing it and point it out. And they know. There's already a built-in head start. You know how when you have a race and people get together on the line and get ready to race? Well, this whole proposal already has a head start built into it. And the head start is the people who have been doing medical cannabis, right? What do they have already in place? The growing apparatus, the distribution apparatus. So when it comes time to putting this thing into play, the people who are already making or acquiring resources based on their substance are the people now who are out in front of the race because anybody else have to put stuff in place. And what you can expect is that there's going to be a cost factor. It's going to be some kind of way you got to have so much money to become a distributor. You got to have $250,000. You got to have $500,000. That's coming. Follow the money. That would be coming. If anybody followed Ohio, did anybody follow the proposal in Ohio? 4 people proposed that they would be the marijuana people, and nobody else could be in it. And you had to have so many millions of dollars in your pocket to show that you was responsible enough to operate the marijuana cannabis. Fortunately, there was enough thinking people in Ohio that said, nah, whatever else happens, this is not happening. Right? And they voted it down. So you have to follow the money. It's billions. What would people not do for billions of dollars? I mean, they locked up 1/4 of the people on the planet as prisoners for billions of dollars. 25% of everybody locked up. It was billions of dollars made. And they're proposing again to make billions of dollars. So I'm not calling them bad people, but I am questioning their integrity in terms of being human.
Thank you for your presentation and for answering our questions. Please feel free to get to know us better while we're waiting for lunch to be ready. And join us at the speaker's table with the red tablecloth after lunch for further discussion. So folks, the presentation's over. Please get to know each other better.